Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me? All right, we're going to get started now. Welcome to City Club Missoula's July Forum, The Future of Marshall Mountain. My name is Brett Rosenberg, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as President and Chair of City Club Missoula's Board of Directors, and I am so happy to see you all today instead of at Marshall Mountain on a beautiful day like this. As you know, City Club's mission is to bring people together to inform and inspire on issues vital to the community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, even if we're discussing challenging issues. Before I introduce our moderator, some thank yous are in order as always. Thanks to Missoula Community Access Television, which records our forums every month as part of the media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190 and is live streaming this forum on its local live platform right now as well. You can also find videos of past City Club Missoula forums by clicking the video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. Thanks to our sponsors, in particular those at the executive level. They include the University of Montana, Blackfoot Communications, and First Security Bank. Our executive level sponsors are key partners in helping to expand audience access and reliably planning and conducting our forums every month. We're grateful to all of our sponsors at all levels, and we invite you to join them by going to our website. And of course, thanks to our Board of Directors and Administrator Danny Howlett, who you met at the front desk. City Club Missoula would also like to acknowledge that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people, some of whom I hope are here with us today. Today we honor the path that they have always shown us in caring for this place for the generations to come. Our moderator for today's panel is Loren Flynn, and I have quite an extensive bio to read here. Loren is the Recreation Manager for Region 2 of the Montana Fish and Wildlife and Parks Department, where he oversees recreation management on 10 state parks, more than 75 fishing access sites, and 15 wildlife management areas, as well as private lands access initiatives such as the Block Management Program. He's worked at FWP since 2009, following a decade-long stint in nonprofit management for the preservation and conservation organizations in Montana. He began his association with the rewards and challenges of recreation management in the late 90s by serving as chair of a river recreation advisory council that helped develop management directions and plans for the Blackfoot River. He is proud to live in and serve a community where outdoor recreation is revered and where community partners continuously drive to solve complex issues together. Loren will introduce our panelists, and I will see you at the break, roughly 12:20 or so, at which point we'll open the forum to questions from the audience in the form of what we call table talk, which I'll explain to those of you who don't know in a little later. Thank you so much, Loren.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Brett. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. Marshall Mountain has been a regional recreational asset for generations. First as a community ski area, and more recently as a place for mountain biking, hiking, and community events. Today, this panel will discuss briefly the current and future opportunities for Marshall and share how the public can be part of a vision and a plan that shapes this local gem in perpetuity. And we'll start from my right here. Rick Wishcamper is the managing member of Izzy Dog LLC, a special purpose entity created solely for the purpose of acquiring Marshall Mountain and ultimately transferring it to public ownership. Rick has spent the past 25 years in Missoula operating an affordable housing development company and volunteering for local organizations including the Poverello Center, the Food Bank, Garden City Harvest, the Missoula Community Foundation, and Five Valleys Land Trust. Next to Rick, we have Morgan Valiant, who has worked for over 20 years to improve habitats and recreational opportunities in our area. Years spent overseeing ecological research projects for the University of Montana and working for Missoula County to organize landowner groups around multi-jurisdictional land management plans supplied Morgan with a strong background in both restoration ecology and consensus building. For a decade, Morgan has served as Missoula Conservation Lands Program Manager, and during that time, the program tripled in size and became regionally recognized as a model for municipal management of public natural areas. Currently, Morgan oversees the City of Missoula's Ecosystem Services Division and focuses his efforts on the development of large, collaborative environmental and outdoor recreation projects. Public acquisition and construction of Marshall Mountain Regional Park is one of the projects Morgan is managing on behalf of our community. And then at the end, last and certainly not least, is Chet Krauser, and he's the Chief Lands and Communities Officer, previously Community and Planning Services for Missoula County, where he oversees the Department of Planning, Development, and Sustainability, Department of Lands, Culture and Recreation, Department of Ecology, and the Division of Grants and Community Programs. He joined the county in 2019 after spending 14 years with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, where he served in a range of recreation management roles. Over the years, his professional experience in the public sector has included on-the-ground management, operations, and oversight of recreation and heritage sites, as well as broader planning, visioning, and policy development at state and local levels. He earned a bachelor's degree from Minnesota State University Mankato and a master's degree from the University of Idaho, both in recreation management. Chet is grateful for the opportunity he has in his day-to-day work to foster relationships with partners and the many amazing folks who keep the fabric of our Missoula community intact and also bring forward visionary ideas for the future. And I think one of the things that runs through the thread of all of those bios is this idea of collaboration, especially when it comes to recreation management and community building. So we'll start off with Rick and go down the line. So, thanks.
Hey, good afternoon. It's great to be here. It's really nice to see everybody in person again and to see so many friendly faces and people who share a deep commitment to Missoula and to building community here. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background on how we got to where we are with the project, and then let Morgan and Chet talk a little bit more about where we're going. But as you all know, Marshall is this local community gem that was a ski area where a lot of us learned to ski and sent our kids to learn to ski and enjoyed. And it shut down in 2002 as an operational ski hill. And the owner of the property allowed Missoula residents to recreate on there while the property was for sale for the last 20 years, essentially. Last year, the property went under contract to a private individual who was most likely going to build a single-family residence and put access to Marshall at potential risk. And that transaction didn't happen, and we mobilized and formed Izzy Dog LLC and purchased what a lot of people consider Marshall Mountain, and what it really is the base area. It's 160 acres at the base with the parking lot, the lodge, a bunch of the lift structure, and then the property above it. When we think of Marshall Mountain, where we go to recreate, we think about going up through the bottom, then you cross onto property that's owned by Five Valleys Land Trust, and go up to the top to where the trails are. And then above that is Forest Service land. So our purpose of acquiring the lower property was so that we could work with the city and with Five Valleys to put together a transaction that would put all of that property into public ownership in perpetuity under one management system, so that we could continue to recreate there individually, continue to coordinate and have events there, and have it be a really vital, thriving part of our community. And that's sort of the long and short of it. And to keep us on track, I pass it on to Morgan. And thank you all for being here, and look forward to talking and answering questions.
Thank you, Rick. And again, I want to extend my thanks for allowing us to come and present this project to you. I'm actually going to come down off the podium because I want to, so I can actually see my slides here. I'm going to give you a really brief update of the project and where we're at today, where we're going. And I'm going to gloss through a lot of this really quickly in the interest of time, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for discussion. So as Rick mentioned, Marshall Mountain was an old ski area. At this point, we are working to try to develop a vision for a larger regional park at the area. And I'm going to give you a brief history of the ski area and then an update of where we're at with the planning process. Skiing in general has occurred on Marshall Ridge for over 100 years now. The Montana mountaineers used to do ski tours from Missoula in the 1920s. In 1937, the first rope tow was established at the Marshall Mountain base area. And then from 1956 all the way through to 2002, 2003, the area operated as a commercial ski hill. And generations of folks from our community have learned to ski there. And I always like to do this with groups. Who learned to ski at Marshall Mountain? Who has skied at Marshall Mountain? Yeah, here we go. Okay. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the area, and sorry for the small font, we'll see if we got a laser. From our location, Marshall is about 5 miles northeast of our current location. You drive through Hellgate Canyon, through the community of East Missoula, hang a left on Marshall Canyon Road, and it dead ends into the base area. That base area property is the lower orange square where you see the dot, is currently owned by Izzy Dog LLC and was purchased last year, as Rick mentioned. What we call the mid-mountain parcel, which is this other orange square, has been owned by Five Valleys Land Trust since 2011. And then this weird kind of green blob up top is the area that was under a U.S. Forest Service special use permit when the ski area was in operation. The city currently has a lease agreement with an option to buy the base area property from Izzy Dog LLC, and project partners have also negotiated the acquisition of Five Valleys Land Trust's mid-mountain parcel. Currently, the city is managing both parcels, both the base area and the mid-mountain parcel, for public recreation and permitting of events and programming on site. Here's a little zoom in of those parcels. You can see the base area, you can see the mid-mountain parcel, you can see that weird polygon that goes up onto Forest Service land, and you can see an extensive system of roads in orange and then trails in blue. And a lot of the trail development on site was facilitated by Five Valleys Land Trust in partnership with Mountain Bike Missoula. In total, the area that we are doing our planning within is 320 acres. We've also, it's worth noting, the county also is a landowner in this area as well. The county actually owns an individual parcel that comprises most of the road network through the site. So why purchase Marshall? As Rick mentioned, obviously there was a lot of skiing on site and a lot of nostalgia, but it is also in the last 20 years really become our community's unofficial home for outdoor recreation programming and events. Thousands of local youth and adults are learning new outdoor recreation skills. We've got local businesses and nonprofits that have started around the ability to use Marshall Mountain to get kids out on the natural areas around our community. We work strongly with the Forest Service, and a lot of people don't realize, but our Forest Service front country lands around Missoula are at capacity. You can't get new permits to do new programming or take groups onto these Forest Service lands. And so Marshall has really served this unique role for 20 years and allowed kids and adults of all backgrounds to access the site. And for those of you that do have kids, I don't think you'll find this as a surprise, but the cost of childcare is really high. Whether you got them in a daycare or in summer programming so you can continue to work, it won't be a surprise, but by the time your kid fledges and leaves the home, you've basically paid for an undergraduate degree. It's cheaper to go to the University of Montana for 4 years than it is to raise a kid and have them in daycare and programming. And we've had this long legacy of private events, from weddings to memorials to family reunions. Marshall is located within an open space cornerstone, and this is part of our city-county open space plan that identifies areas where we want to acquire properties. And in 2018, City-County did a countywide survey of residents to look at priorities within our community for recreation, parks, open space, and trails. And over 70% of the people, when asked specifically about Marshall, supported acquisition. And actually, it was called out in the executive summary as being right up there with wildlife, and ecological land purchases also included purchasing Marshall Mountain. And it's worth noting that the majority of those folks that supported purchasing Marshall Mountain were households that were most likely in the city limits, that did have kids, and that did frequent a lot of parks already. So we already knew that folks generally were supportive of purchasing Marshall. We don't really know what we're going to do with Marshall if we decide to acquire it as a community. And so for the last year, we've really been working to develop a broad community of vision and then start to take that vision and narrow it in to an actual master plan for the site. One of the first things we did was to develop some primary partners. And this is a group, call it a think tank, that has just helped steer this process. And that includes the city of Missoula, Missoula County, the two landowners on site, Five Valleys Land Trust and Izzy Dog LLC, and Mountain Bike Missoula, that nonprofit that is intimately familiar with the lands and has been working to steward the mountain for the last 20 years. We went through, hired a facilitator, had stakeholder meetings, had a in-person open house / party up there last September, had virtual open houses. We've been collecting a lot of data on natural resources and infrastructure, and we've developed this shared community of vision. And this vision is available online. Overall, we got great responses. We had over 700 people attend our 2021 community celebration and provide ideas on what we should do at Marshall. We had 93 separate stakeholders sit through half a dozen facilitated stakeholder meetings. We had over 1,300 participants on our online survey that was posted on Engage Missoula website. This set a record for the city of Missoula. There was like twice as many people responding to what should we do on Marshall Mountain survey than any other city project that has ever been posted on Engage Missoula website. So lots of community input. Far more community input in this vision than we have had in any other community visioning process that we've gone through. I'm not going to go through the whole vision. You can go read it. It's like a 50, 70-page document, a lot of great graphs if you're into graphs. But one of the big things that have come out from our community is that it should be a high-use, all-season, all-access public outdoor recreation and education area. It should serve as this incubator to promote responsible stewardship and active programming. It should be planned in a manner that honors the character and legacy of Marshall Mountain, specifically those nostalgic uses, and including but not limited to snow-based sports, mountain biking, and community events. And then again, it should be this community asset that continues to just be a great amenity to provide those very first outdoor recreational experiences, those daily outdoor recreational experiences, and then that good stewardship ethic that we want to teach folks about when they go and recreate on other areas. So what is a master plan? So right now, that community vision really provides those sideboards in which we can actually plan. We are under contract right now with a group called SE Group. This is a consultant that has been working on these exact projects, taking old defunct ski areas and turning them into a community regional park for over 50 years. They actually started out designing actual ski mountains, and as snow has become harder to find and a lot of resorts are looking at 365-year operation, SE Group has transitioned into this niche of creating regional parks at old ski areas. And so this is generally, this is actually, I stole from one of their plans that they're doing for Chikara Mountain Park, very similar thing, community park adjacent to a lot of Forest Service land. And it really, this master plan will tell us what amenities will get built on site, what programming can be allowed, and also as part of the contract, we're going to get a fiscal analysis and business plan to operate the site. We have finished data collection, which is phase one. We are moving into strategy, really kind of taking what we have as our constraints or opportunities on site, running it through our community vision, developing our plan for what is possible, and then phase three will be design, And then after that, once we know what we're going to build, we're going to develop a plan on what it's going to cost to maintain. So to give you an idea of where we're at in the process, right now we're right in here in the thick of our master planning process. As this master planning process has continued, we also have an active fundraising campaign that's kicking off. And so we've got a Friends of group, Friends of Marshall Mountain, or FOAM for short. Any of you guys in the government, we're always fond of good acronyms. Our consultants are working on that community vision. When we get that master plan developed, we've discovered that really knowing what we're going to build is really a key question when you're going to ask people for money to help build the site. Everybody wants to know, okay, you're going to acquire it, but what are you going to do up there? By the end of this summer, we will have an adopted master plan, early fall. There's a lot of opportunity for you to engage in development of that master plan. And then from this fall all the way through until our lease period runs out in spring of 2023, we will be actively fundraising and to both acquire and then build Marshall Mountain. Overall, if we're successful, construction up there would certainly be phased over time. And again, with that, I want to thank you for coming out. And I'm going to leave this link up for a little bit. On the city's website of Engage Missoula, you can go on and find out a ton of information about where we're at in the project, sign up for updates when it's time to comment on the plan, et cetera, et cetera. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Chet Krauser, a really key partner over at the county, who has been actively engaged in helping us craft this vision.
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. And I won't spend a lot of time because I think Morgan did a really great job of articulating a little bit of where the conversation has been. And by and large, I would say that the city is taking the lead role. As Morgan talked about in a couple of the slides, the county's been there pretty much all along the way, from the very beginning conversations all the way through this master planning process, selection of the consultant, et cetera. I think from a county perspective, obviously our county is a little bit broader than just the city, and so I think we've got a really good opportunity to blend both some of the needs that the city has, opportunities that the city has, along with perspectives that the county has and residents that are outside the city limits. And I think, as Morgan mentioned, in terms of this regional recreational opportunity, not only is it unique in the site itself, but I think it's also unique in terms of what we can provide there, not only for the city and county residents, but folks who I think come to visit Missoula and look to sites like this as a huge amenity and driver to our economy as well. So I think I'll keep it short that way just to make sure we have enough time for questions and comments.
Thanks, Chet. All right, well, we deliberately kept the presentation short today because we figured there'd be a lot of audience questions. And so we're going to turn it over to Table Talk now, which is, in my humble opinion, the reason we're all here. The way it works is that each table will introduce themselves to each other and then come up with a question to ask our panelists. It can be for a particular panelist or all or any. We ask that you come up with a specific question rather than make statements. When the time has come, in 10 minutes or so, someone with a mic will come around to each table and you'll have your opportunity to ask a question. We ask that members of the media hold their specific questions until after the forum. Hopefully the panelists can stick around, but you're welcome to participate in any of the table talk with our audience. Again, as I said at the beginning, we're committed to civil discourse, so we ask that you keep your questions respectful. And I'll start the timer now, so 10 minutes, go. All right, time's up. We have two gentlemen with microphones going across the room. When it's your turn, we ask that you stand up and introduce yourself prior to asking your questions. Thanks.
Hello. What?
Josh had a great question.
What? Hi, I'm Nancy Picard with Partners Hope Foundation. We have two questions. What's going on with the lawsuit that ensued from the man and his wife that were trying to buy it? I don't know. Everybody seems to be aware of the fact that there's a lawsuit, and we were just wondering if that's going to impact any of the fundraising. And then we wanted to know if you're going to have public transportation up to the area.
I'll speak to the first question, and I'll pass the mic for the second question. The lawsuit is still pending. The lawsuit does not include Marshall Mountain, Izzy Dog, or the city, so it doesn't affect our operations or our ownership. It's between the seller and the person and the other party. So there's no cloud on title. There's no cloud over the project itself. And I'll pass the mic for transportation.
Yeah, so I'll take a shot at this one. That's a conversation that certainly is in the mix. And I think it's really, and we were just talking about it actually, which is why you probably heard us laughing about it. We're basically talking about some successes we've had in another area on that front. But before I go to that, I think one of the things Rick brought up, which I think is really critical, is as we think about equity in relation to Marshall and how do we provide Marshall as an opportunity for our community, one of those things that can be a huge limiting factor is transportation, especially for a site that's not necessarily right on, one of the bus lines or something like that. And so one of the things we've had recent discussions around, more so related to river recreation use, is what sorts of opportunities can we use with our existing public transportation systems to not only just provide the opportunity for access, but also address some of the congestion issues that we see at sites where you have particularly hot times around the river, say for example. And Sharon access near East Missoula is one of those key places where we've had a number of conversations beginning last year with ASUM Transportation as well as with Mountain Lion, and having them look at how they could even on a seasonal basis create some routes around some of those peak times. And it was amazing. We were just talking about kind of the science behind that. They're able to quickly put that into their models and come up with routes and things that seem to make that work and pencil for them. So hopefully those kinds of things can continue to happen. I think ASUM Transportation has a really unique angle with their students as well, and looking at future potential for not only just river recreation, but broader recreation, as that's obviously a huge draw for folks that are coming to the university. And then how does that relate to the rest of our community? And is there partnership opportunities outside of even just the University of Montana and what they provide for students? So there are some pretty cool things happening. I think probably a couple more seasons of what we see on the rivers will probably give us even a better model to start to point in new directions. And hopefully the timing on that will be perfect for Morgan as he gets those master plan copies and starts to think about the bus line or route that'll head up to Marshall. So.
Yeah, we're thinking Pepto-Bismol pink buses to match the chairlift.
So this table, and my table mates, please make sure that I get this right. So we had a number of things we wanted to talk about regarding the area, but the primary one is the development of the land into the Marshall area and also adjacent. We've got Mount Jumbo, we've got the land between Marshall and East Missoula. What's going to happen to that? What about fire safety up there? Is it possible to get out with just a single road? And somebody already brought up transportation into it. So development, is that correct? Development is the key word.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, let me start. I think Chet and I will tag team this one. I'm really glad you brought up the natural resource management side of things. I mean, we've been focusing a lot on the recreation because that level of planning just takes a lot of thought and takes, it's a small site that we have to accommodate multiple uses on. But natural resource management is certainly going to dovetail as we do our master plan. There are, those old ski runs have not been managed in a long time. They have grown in with a bunch of encroaching conifers. There is going to be a fair amount of forestry work that's going to need to be done on site. One thing that we have been able to do as a community quite well, and this is not just the city, but a lot of adjacent both private and public landowners, is there is quite a bit of funding available for that type of work. We've actually thinned 600 acres on Mount Jumbo, and the city's not really put, many hard dollars to it at all. It's all been through federal grants and state level grants. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to address some of those issues. The master plan is going to really tell us what that level of development is going to be on the base area. And the base area is where you see the buildings, it's most of the flat stuff, and where you could actually build buildings. And one of the questions we still have is, will there even be buildings on site? What is the spectrum of development that we're going to have when you enter the base area? Will it be that trailhead at the end of a dirt road, or will it be an event center at the far end? And so that level of development is certainly going to, and we've already had a bunch of great conversations since the site is in the county. We're working with county planners to make sure we understand zoning and all that. And so making sure that what we build at the base area is feasible. And I don't see us running sewer up there. It would be using probably septic, small footprints, that kind of stuff. And so there's some on-site restrictions there. And then I'm not going to talk about development of the whole corridor. I do think most of the lands, as you go up Marshall, the further you go, most of it is federal land or city land that is not going to be developed. There are certainly some private landowners up there as well, and we don't know what will happen with those properties. One of the things that we are approaching Marshall Mountain as is a new type of open space that would really be focused on kind of high-use recreation, knowing that that is one of a huge community need that we have right now. Like I said earlier, it's hard to get permits on Forest Service land to do programming or run events. On a lot of our city open space, like Mount Jumbo specifically, Mount Jumbo was purchased with wildlife habitat preservation as its priority. We intentionally don't do a lot of development. We intentionally, as a community, have decided not to allow a bunch of organized recreation. Marshall could serve as a place where we could funnel a lot of that higher use recreation because we know the site can handle it. It was a commercial ski area for 60 years.
Yeah, and I don't know if that maybe captured an answer to your development question. If you have more to that, I'm happy to add. But
Again, it's a group point. What about public development at the mouth of Marshall Grade and towards East Missoula? I mean, this could be a hot place. A lot of hotels. How can that be controlled?
control of the hotel motel type commercial development. Yeah. So we just had some recent zoning that Missoula County zoning update. Those sorts of regulations obviously would come into effect, and we've got other processes, et cetera, even corridor processes that have taken place to plan for transportation through that East Missoula to Bonner Milltown area. So most of those guiding documents and plans that we have in place now would guide and direct that type of development as it would continue. But I think to the extent that we can, we'd certainly encourage to the extent the community wanted to see those sorts of amenities or opportunities within their community, that we would try to use the opportunities from Marshall to also leverage those opportunities where communities wanted to see development for their benefit or for, some added public benefit even in terms of use of the mountain. So.
Hi. So I'm Annette Marcia, so I'm with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. And our table, we had a whole bunch of questions. Some of them were about use or potential uses, like, do you think skiing will come back? What about dogs? Can we, have more access for dogs up there? But I think the question that I'll throw out, and you can maybe speak to those others if, is one of the questions that we had is, what if the city doesn't buy the property? What happens then?
I think this goes to you.
Yeah.
You want it? Why don't you okay. That is a question that we've all been thinking a lot about, and I think it is worth noting that, we have what Izzy Dog has done is they've stepped up and bought our community some time to figure it out. And what we really do need to figure out is whether or not we want to acquire the property in the first place, and that is a decision that has not been made. I mean, we will have to look at potential use of vetting our open space bond funds for acquisition. We're going to have private fundraising going along. There will be public process around public acquisition, as there always is. If it's not acquired, one of the things we were also talking about here, besides transportation, was as parents that have to sit online at midnight waiting for camps to open up to make sure you have that week during the summer, those 2 weeks during the summer where you can get a kid in a camp. Our city Parks and Rec program has, oh God, grown tenfold in the last decade. We, in the last 3 years, just at Marshall alone, and I don't have a slide yet, but we're going to be getting these into subsequent presentations, more than 20,000 kids have used the site. This year, all of our camps within City Parks and Rec filled up in 24 hours, and we've got over 3,000 kids on a waiting list. There's no other place to take them, and this is the same thing with MOLA or NICA, the Missoula Mammoths. I mean, all these groups that are running these outdoor recreation kids, we just don't have capacity. And one thing that the pandemic really, I think, taught us all was that we live in an awesome place, and it's nice to have these amenities so close to home. But it also showed how much of an economic driver childcare is. And so there's going to be a huge hit to our community just from that standpoint alone. I think the other thing is, you know, we were talking about it, the number of people when I asked who's been to Marshall, I mean, you saw faces light up. Folks are nostalgic. And this is also gets to the core of what do we want to protect as a Missoula thing. What is Missoula? We are changing a lot as a community. This could be our opportunity here at Marshall to preserve something that's been a part of our community for over 100 years. So I could go on for a long time, and I know we've talked a lot about this, so I'll let you get in there as well.
Those are great answers, and it's a really good question, and it's a question that my wife and I talked through quite a bit when we made the decision to do this. And we're committed to finding a way to get Marshall into the hands of the public where it belongs. The city in the county are the right partners to make that happen. If that weren't to happen with this partnership, you know, we wouldn't be looking at Plan B. We'd be looking at Plan D or E or F. You know, we'd look for other partners to work with. Whitney and Ben and Ramy are here from Five Valleys. They're our adjacent landowner. We'd work together to try to find another way to get this property into the hands of the public.
I might just ask a follow-up to that. Assuming that, you know, we talk about the funding strategy, maybe to bring that into public ownership, and then you talk, Morgan, about the amount of use that goes on up there with camps and the other things. What is there, or is there a strategy that's been identified so that it's actively managed going forward?
Yeah, I think that's really important. You know, and obviously, you know, we will have a business plan as part of our master plan. It's hard to know what management is going to look like if you don't know what you're going to build. And so we need to really figure out what we're going to build and then work around our O&M budget behind that. We definitely think that this is a site that can generate money and offset costs of management. We have had a pretty good track record of doing that in our aquatic centers and our pools within town. The camps that I mentioned through city parks have a 70% recovery and so it basically pays for all the staff and supplies and materials that are used. And so that's certainly part of the equation. I think there's a lot of opportunity as well and to look at to continue to use private philanthropy and endowments to help steward the property. We also have an opportunity when we develop this master plan to look at potentially doing things on site that could actually generate revenue, like actually have something that you'd go up and pay to play kind of thing, whether it's a slide or a small rope tow, whether or not the site is going to continue to hold. I mean, one of the reasons it became a defunct ski area is it didn't hold snow for long enough. But it still has the best bunny hill in the entire valley. And putting up a rope tow or figuring out and grooming snow, you know, all that stuff is going to get worked out. And we certainly want to make sure that we're not even opposed to public-private partnerships, like leasing out certain areas at the base as well. And so all this stuff is going to be getting fleshed out through that master plan. Did you guys want to add any?
Thanks. I'm Emily Ralston with Destination Missoula, and our table had a lot of good questions. I think one that kind of stood out for us was, we've talked a lot about like family use or like kids camps, and biking for sure. But what are kind of some other ideas about, making it like diversified programming or access and accessibility for, ADA or adaptive sports has been talked about.
That is huge, and that actually came out in our community. So the question was about other potential uses besides what we've have been kind of the primary uses up there of skiing and mountain biking. So equity, adaptability, getting folks up there with mobility issues. We've got a lot of opportunity for that kind of stuff, and that is something that came out loud and clear in our community vision. Being able to provide a space that is designed to accommodate all use is something that we can do at Marshall. One of the first things, and as we start to think about developing the site, getting some easy up trails. Most of the flat, mellow terrain is actually kind of mid-mountain, and so getting up there is a major barrier, and is certainly one that we are going to solve. And so I think the ability to bring in new uses for folks, we've got a lot of folks that want to be able to hand cycle, but we just don't have the right trails in town. And so we are faced with a blank slate at Marshall, which is kind of nice, and we can design these amenities from scratch. The other thing, just casually, we opened up a trailhead there last August, and we're averaging about 40 people a day. And that was through the entire winter. And I would say about half those people are folks that are just coming up to walk around. There's a lot of nature viewing. There's a lot of folks that are like, I haven't stepped foot on this site in 40 years. And so there's so many different activities that are occurring up there. I would say I find someone just up there laying in the grass every time I go up there, just literally just enjoying the scenery. And so, I think the sky's the limit, and the fact that it was an old ski area gives us a lot of opportunity to design and build recreational amenities that we've not seen in Missoula yet. Did you want to add any of that?
It's a great question, and it's a great point, and we're really working carefully and closely. Parks and Rec, Donna and Morgan and Meg are very committed to working with the best folks in the country on equity work. So we're really, the process has been very aware of the fact that we need to provide access to all voices in the process, and to looking at barriers from the voices in the process as well as barriers to all different types of folks coming up and enjoying the opportunities up there.
Hot mic. Thank you. I'm Whitney Schwab with Five Valleys Land Trust, and I appreciate all of the discussion today and the questions. And our table focused a lot around the programming piece, and I think you guys have done a really nice job of answering that. I think it's hard to tell, just how much use it does get unless you spend a couple of days up there or even a slice of an afternoon and just see the kids coming and going. And especially this summer with the city managing the property at the base, just what that accessibility has already done for increasing not only public use but the programmatic use that it sees. One of the topics that we also shifted focus to was about wildlife habitat and the wildlife values, and I feel like you guys have covered some natural resource management topics as well as the programming use and the historical use of recreation and ideally future use of recreation, but if you could speak to the wildlife values, that would be great too.
I'll maybe take a stab at that and see if anyone else wants to answer it. I actually had a conversation this morning, Whitney, with Liz Bradley, who's our wildlife manager, specific to Marshall Mountain. And, her comment was, we know, for instance, that elk are using that as they're moving off of Jumbo in the spring. But they're not hanging in those areas. They're just kind of passing through. It's a corridor. And we think there's been some adaptation by wildlife there because, as Morgan points out, people have been recreating up there for 100 years. So that's not new. That's not a new thing. And so assuming that, that the development is going to take place at the base, then there's really not, at least at first blush, any new concerns about wildlife habitat up there. The concerns, I think, or maybe just even the things to be aware of, are interactions, for instance, between humans and bears, which are growing in our community, and we're seeing, growing populations of both black and now grizzly bears passing through this community. And so thinking about those interactions, especially of mountain bikers who are moving at a faster rate of speed than a hiker or something like that, those are things we just need to be aware of in our community, not just at Marshall, but be aware of in our community and be developing, I think, communication strategies, but also making sure that our public are coming up knowing how they should act in those situations.
Yeah, I think to add on that, we have done a pretty, I didn't include the slide, but a pretty intensive resource inventory on site. The other species of concern that's prevalent up there is the flammulated owl. And so we just recognizing that big snags are required for that little guy, and which if you guys haven't looked it up, look up flammulated owl. They're really cute. There's also, a trout fishery running right through the parking lot right now. We've had initial discussions with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and Trout Unlimited. They've done a lot of work on Marshall Creek, and they have assured us that they are going to be good partners in doing a lot more work on that section of Marshall Creek to improve the fishery. And so there's certainly some opportunity to actually improve habitat, and then making sure that we know where, if there is critical habitat, that we can avoid or steer folks around it as we develop our infrastructure. Yeah, please.
And then I'll just add to what's already been said, but we're talking about Marshall. Obviously, wildlife don't necessarily follow our various boundaries that we have in place. And this probably isn't just specific to wildlife, but as we think more broadly about the landscape, where do we have wildlife crossing either from Marshall or to Marshall into these other areas that surround that? And not only that, but we have traditional uses related to hunting as well that extend well beyond Marshall, but use this as a jumping off standpoint to get into further areas and go hunting and do things like that. So while we are doing this master planning, we're always having to keep in mind what are those needs or those interests that might be just outside the boundary, but might all be part and parcel to what we do moving forward.
So anecdotally, a couple of weeks ago, there was a big mountain bike race up at Marshall. It was the MTCX National Cross Country Downhill, and there were bikers in from all over the country, and it was raining, and it was sunny, and it was raining and sunny, and it was just kind of crazy. And at the end of the event, there was a DJ up there, and it was bumping, and this little black bear comes down the slope, and the people are dancing, and the black bear's doing his thing, and it was all pretty cool, and makes you realize this is a special place, and up here with the right music, we can all get along.
Hi there, Dawn McGee from Good Works Ventures and the High Stakes Foundation. One of our table's questions was, since it's not in the city limits, why is it a city project versus a county project? Second question was, what's the purchase price? And the third question was, since it's sort of been doing its thing on its own without any intermediation for the last 20 years, why do anything out there at all?
I might have to hand it to Morgan once I forget the questions. So maybe I'll try to remember these. I might have to ask you to just repeat those if I miss a couple. But so Morgan, I'll probably pass to you on part of this too. But in terms of why a city project and not a county project if it's not in the city. One of the things, if you go back to Morgan's presentation, a lot of the planning around a site like Marshall have been joint city-county planning efforts. And so for right now, we're in a joint mode of trying to explore this opportunity and look at what the future for Marshall ought to be. But by and large, the city has had a presence at Marshall and looking at these programming opportunities and is much better equipped than the county has been in terms of that programmatic standpoint. So the county really doesn't have the existing structure within our recreation programs to be able to extend the kind of opportunities to the community that you see with the kids that are headed up there. As Morgan talked about, the demand is just really high. And we know that it's out there. So that's one of the reasons, but it's also the same reason that we're both working on this together. In terms of how we move forward to find various funds and how we approach the project, I think those are all details we'll have to continue to work out once we see what those details end up looking like, what the public would like to see, what are feasible opportunities, what creative ideas might come from this process that we hadn't already thought of. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit. I mean, I think Chet hit on it. I mean, the city and the county have been partnering on land acquisition for a long time. That's why we have city-county open space plans. And it's pretty frequent that, in that outside city limit donut, that we look at projects jointly together. For instance, the whole Tower Street conservation area on the south side of town on the other side of the reserve, the majority of that is not annexed into the city, but it is city-owned. And there's about 300 acres down there right now. Mount Sentinel, when I first started working for the city, I don't think Mount Sentinel actually got annexed until 2007, the majority of the face of Mount Sentinel. And so it's not uncommon. The purchase price is $1.92 million for the entire 320 acres. Did we hit it all? Was there anything else in there?
There was the other one. I feel like we missed. I think maybe the other was if it's been kind of going along as has been for a while. Why jump in at this point? I'm kind of paraphrasing that, so I apologize if I got that wrong. But I think that's a fair question, right? And it's probably not a bad one to ask. But I think there's some urgency around the situation that we saw unfold where, if we're not proactive, if we're not thinking ahead about the opportunities that exist in our community and at times taking some steps to make things happen, we'll find that we lose those opportunities to preserve those into the future. And so, as was the case here, there was some real urgency around the notion that Marshall might actually disappear after all of this time of sort of feeling like it's been that way. And to be honest, we see the same thing with our commercial timberlands that change ownership throughout western Montana. And, I think people get complacent at some level of seeing and experiencing these places around our homes as public lands or supported in perpetuity for the purposes that people have become accustomed to use them. And in a lot of cases, that isn't necessarily the case. And so I guess I would throw out the perspective that if we have these opportunities within our community that are unique, that are somewhat nostalgic or a part of the fabric of our community, and I think Missoula's great at this, we need to be proactive in thinking about creative ways that we can bring these solutions forward so that future generations can appreciate these and benefit from them, and that we can use these areas to continue to address the needs of our community.
Well, here's a quick question. What's the status of the master plan? Because that would answer a lot of our questions here.
We hope to have a draft available for comment by the public by the end of August. And so we just finished, there was a bunch of site assessments. We had to assess all the buildings, assess all the infrastructure, get a bunch of data collection. And now we're still in planning mode, are going to actually start putting stuff down on maps and then getting it out to the public for comment. And so it's really important to go to that Engage Missoula site and sign up for notifications. So when these plans come available, you get an email and you can go on and check it out.
Hello, Steve Fletcher, attorney in town. And at any rate, got a couple questions. One of them is, do you foresee that any of that would be sold for private homes to help perhaps finance some of the projects up at Marshall? The second is, do you foresee perhaps the chairlift becoming operational again and operating? I know that when it closed, there actually was a banner snow year that year, and also a lot of parents had to go to Discovery to the ski school up there because Marshall or Snowball was a little bit too much for some of the younger kids. So I'm wondering if perhaps that might become operational again. Also for bikes too, I suppose the chairlift could get people up the mountain. But at any rate.
We've not really talked about any kind of sale of portions of the property to generate money. I think that would be a incredible last resort that we would not want to entail at all. It hasn't even really come up in any of our discussions. As far as the chairlift, we've had a lot of discussions around the chairlift. The SE group they were in town 2 weeks ago, and they speak chairlift. They've worked on a whole bunch of different mountains, and they laughed when they saw that one. I think the cost of, I was like, give me a ballpark, and they were like, yeah, you probably need to invest, $800 to $1 million in the lift to get it running again and get it up to standard, and that's a pretty big lift. The pun not intended, I guess. But the lift really does provide what could potentially be some key access components. When you talk about equity and getting people up, having some kind of a mechanized means to do that is certainly not off the table. If it's that same pink lift, though, it's not looking like it's going to pencil. One thing that I think, could be operational in a very short period of time is the rope tow down on the base area. And with good grooming, you can farm snow and make it last for a while. And provide some of those things, like you mentioned, which I totally forgot, like doing the 3-hour drive back and forth from Discovery with kids in the middle of winter is not great. And being able to actually have a local rope tow again, which is very similar to how Marshall started back in '37, is certainly something that would be feasible in the short term. Long-term goals of getting people up the mountain and folks certainly that want to recreate, but also folks that just have general mobility issues, and to some of that flatter terrain is a piece of the puzzle we're still trying to figure out. Anything to add there, guys?
Did we get everybody's questions, every table? I think we have time for maybe one more. Quick one.
Hi, I'm Lucy Bigley, and I'm with Glacier Country Tourism. And you had mentioned that part of this plan was sustainable recreation. And part of what we as an organization work on, we represent 8 counties in western Montana. And part of what we what we are constantly working on is recreating responsibly and trying to help in the process of making sure that this place isn't loved to death. And I'm wondering how you would incorporate, you talked about sustainable recreation, how would you incorporate that into this plan?
Thank you. Great question. And no offense to any of the adults in the room, but I've given up trying to teach adults lessons, like new stewardship ethics. Kids get it. And I think one of the things that we really have well ingrained, and I'm not just talking city parks programs, but all the outdoor recreation programming that's going on in kids camps, is that stewardship ethic is getting taught more than I've ever seen it. And so I really do see Marshall being an incubator for training our next land stewards and land users. And so it could play a key role for that education. And it's being able to build an area that can handle the use and teach people how the skills needed when they go on to areas that can't handle heavy levels of use, on how they can take care of it. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think in general, we've got a lot of discussions and region-wide discussions that are occurring right now on that very issue about these sites getting loved to death.
Yeah, So I mean, I think there is still an adult audience, and I totally appreciate what Morgan's bringing up as far as the ability for our youth to learn quicker than I certainly can at this point. But I think, you know, the notion that we're now seeing the tourism community come forward with this idea that sustainability is really a part of what we need to be promoting with these opportunities, along with recognizing the changeover that we see in our community, not only just people visiting, say, for the summer or for a winter activity, or the university students that might be new, but the turnover in our community as it relates to use of these places is actually pretty significant, as is the experience level that individuals have with these activities. And I'm constantly amazed at the number of folks who might show up for a learn to camp sort of weekend. You know, you can almost fill the entire registration with people who have never, ever made a s'more, started a campfire, you know, you name it. Which for people who live here for that reason, maybe have done that their whole life, which probably all of us have, we kind of scratch our heads about it. But it's important for us to think about the segment of population that isn't familiar with those things, and how intentional we have to be, not only with places like Marshall, but all across the valley, extending beyond the valley into, you know, west central Montana, western Montana regionally. The same messages apply really everywhere, and the more intentional, the more consistent we can be around some of those, I think the better off we'll be in preserving these places, or at least conserving their ability to sustain the uses that we have grown to appreciate and really value as a community.
Perfect ending. Loren, Rick, Morgan, and Chet, thank you so much. This is a great presentation, great forum, very timely. I would say for everyone who's still interested, I believe that there is more public comment period coming, so check their websites. You can probably get on a mailing list for updates as well. Thank you again to our sponsors, especially the University of Montana, First Security Bank, and Blackfoot Communications. And mostly to the audience, thank you. You're the reason we're here. We really appreciate it here at City Club. One announcement, we are working with the various campaigns for the new Western Montana Congressional District to have some sort of candidates forum here on August 8th. The details are sort of working themselves out, but more information should be on our Facebook page and our website within the week. So stay tuned, and that should do it for another City Club forum. Thanks, everyone.